Are you thinking about moving your family to Aledo, Texas? If so, you've probably already heard about the great schools, the wide open spaces, and the family-friendly neighborhoods. But what does it actually cost to live here? In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the real numbers from housing costs to taxes to groceries, transportation. I'm even going to touch on eggs and beef. So let's dive in and see if Aledo is going to be the best place for your family and your budget. Okay, so in this video, we're going to be talking about the cost of living in Aledo, Texas. And in some areas, we're going to talk about the difference between like Aledo and the US average. In some aspects, we're going to talk about the cost of living in Texas versus the US average. And then in other areas, we're going to be talking about the difference between Aledo and other areas inside Texas like Fort Worth. So we're going to cover a wide range of topics. We're going to do some different types of comparisons. It's not all just Aledo versus national average or just Texas versus national average, because that's going to be this, all Texas stuff would be the same. So let's stick around. If I don't hit on something that you are interested in, that you want to know about, put that in the comment section below. If you do enjoy these videos, hit that subscribe button and let's jump into it. Okay, well, let's jump straight into housing prices first. So in the Aledo area, as I've mentioned in other videos, the median home price is about $650. I tell people, really, you should expect plus or minus maybe 700 as kind of like that average range. And we do have homes, we really, you can get a starter home for maybe close to 400. They're kind of few and far between there for like solid good homes. But we go well up to 1.5, even homes in the 2 million range is really not unheard of. And there are certain neighborhoods where those price points are, that's what you should expect. So how does that fit with other areas in Texas or the national average or Fort Worth? From the best research I can figure out is the national average home price or median home price is about $420,000. Now that's probably not what you should expect in certain major metros, right? But when you average everything out and get the medians, you're about 420. That's actually pretty close to what to expect in Fort Worth proper, is a median home value of that 425-ish range. So Aledo is going to be well above the US national median. It's going to be above the Fort Worth median, but most people know that and expect that when they're coming out to the area. And so if you're coming from, certain coastal cities, or states or California or the Northeast, that's really not going to be a sticker shock to you, right? But we do have some other financial surprises coming, so stick around in the video to see what other costs you should be planning for if you're thinking about moving to Aledo area. And now if you are just starting your search and maybe this is your first time on the channel, hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. I have lots of neighborhood tours. I have some pros and cons videos and information about the cities and the surrounding areas that all fall into and feed into the Aledo schools, which is the primary driver for people moving to this area. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about is one of the most important things to make sure that you understand and are prepared for in your move to Texas. And now, depending on where you're coming from or how you've thought about this or what your knowledge is, it might be a bigger issue than you are aware of, or it might be a significantly less of an issue than you're concerned about. So, and that is taxes. So the two things I want to touch on in the taxes are the state income taxes or lack thereof, and then the property taxes, because Texas does have the 7th highest property tax rate in the US, but to balance that out, it actually has no state income tax. And so how do the property taxes compare? Well, the US average property tax rate is under 1%. That's like approximately 0.9%. And then the Texas has an average property tax rate of 1.58%. So that's like almost 0.7% higher, which is almost 100% higher than 0.9. And then the Aledo area has an average tax rate of about 2.2, and that really ranges from like 1.8 up to 2.8%. So the property taxes in Texas and in Aledo specifically, and really this 2.2 to 2.4 is gonna be pretty normal for any sort of major metro, major city, anything like that. Like Fort Worth is like 2.2. So it's not significantly higher than any other major metro, but it is significantly higher than many other states in the US. But now where, you said, well, no state income tax. Okay, so how does this balance out? And so really a good way to process this is, well, one, if you're coming from another state with no state income tax and it has low property tax, then that is just a net negative for you and there's gonna be increased carrying costs. But if you're coming from an area that even has maybe like 4% or even a 5% state income tax that you're paying, it's probably gonna be a wash or maybe a net benefit for you depending on your income level. So I was doing some rough, back of the napkin math that's not going to apply to you specifically, but if you're coming from an area, like if your income is like 200 and you have a tax rate of even the state income tax of like 5 or 4%, when you balance out the income tax savings with the difference in the property taxes, it's not all the property taxes, there's going to be the difference in the property taxes, you're probably coming out ahead. And there are states like California for you, especially for high income earners, where they may be paying 10 to 13% in state income tax. And then there's some areas that just have like states with like flat in state income tax of like 10%. So that's something to think about is one, if your property taxes are going to be likely higher than where you're coming from, just it's likely going to be higher. But if you were paying state income, then that's something to be aware of and how that balances out. If you have some sort of, VA exemption for taxes, that's a huge benefit. I've had multiple clients with anywhere from, 50 to 100% disability rating, which that percentage applies to your property tax rate like a discount. So if you have a 100% disability rating, you have a 100% discount on your property taxes, meaning zero property tax. And then those higher end tax rates, like that 2.6 to 2.8 range, those are because of PIDs and MUDs, which I have, that I've talked about in other videos, but in like the pros and cons videos in Aledo. But we would just want to check and see what those are, because like technically PIDs aren't classified as property tax. So even if you did have a disability rating, that likely would not apply to the PID. It would just apply to your normal property tax. Now remember that Aledo has a little bit higher taxes even than other parts of Texas. Some of those taxes, a big chunk really, 50% or more typically of the property taxes in the Aledo area are really school taxes. And those are funding the excellent schools in the Aledo area. And so that is why many people end up moving to Aledo area. They're looking for somewhere where they are glad to have their kids learn and play sports and be around other kids that are there with supportive families, or they're moving to those areas that have those good schools like Aledo for the property values and the retention of value. So it's not all negative, but you are going to have higher than average property tax rates, likely higher than where you're coming from. But depending on your situation, there may not actually be that big of a negative impact when you look at it as a whole. And then those higher than average tax rates there are some benefits related to that, especially in the Aledo area. Okay, so the third thing I want to touch on is utilities. And this is something that actually, there can be kind of a wide spread of what your expenses might be. But first off, I want to touch on Texas in general is typically going to be a deregulated electricity state, which means DFW Metroplex. Oncor laid most of the electrical power lines that actually deliver the electricity to your home. And what that does is it allows you to pick whichever provider of electricity you want. And then your bill is going to have a fixed flat rate for the delivery of your electricity that goes to Oncor, and then you're paying the variable, then you can shop the provider, right? And there's lots of different ways to do that effectively. There's websites like powertochoose.org. There's companies like Energy Ogre, which will monitor your actual usage, and then whenever it's time to renew, they'll find the one that's most effective for you. And so there's other companies that do that, but the electricity is typically deregulated for most of Texas. However, in Parker County, there is a company called Tri-County Electric that laid their own lines in some of the areas in Parker County and then some surrounding areas. So if you are living in an area where Tri-County laid the power lines, the delivery lines, they are actually the provider on their own lines. So you have to use them in those areas. So like Morningstar had power lines by Tri-County. So if you're in Morningstar, you're going to be paying Tri-County. That's your only option. If you are in some other neighborhoods, that's going to be the same thing. I live in a neighborhood that is not a Tri-County delivery area, so I can shop my energy rate. So I'm going to touch on two things. One, the Aledo area has about a 4% lower than average electricity price. That's honestly probably because of the deregulated nature of the Texas energy market. However, if you are in a Tri-County delivery zone, and this could fluctuate year to year, how everything's going, but when I last compared the Tri-County rates to my rate, because I had clients asking, and the Tri-County rates are public, you can pull them up and they basically set the rate for the year. I think I was paying like 12.8 or 13 cents per kilowatt. And Tri-County was at 14 cents per kilowatt. So whatever that math, I did the math at the time, and so the numbers I just mentioned might not be exact, but it was about an 8% more expensive price for Tri-County than it was for me shopping my rate effectively and making sure I was getting the cheapest for myself. That's something to think about. It's not a bank breaker, but a Tri-County home is probably going to have slightly more expensive energy than other places. And then get into sewer and water. So really, those things are really hard to gauge from one city to another city, national average. So I'm really not going to touch on that. But where can you get the real savings is if you live outside city limits on an acre or two, and if you have your own septic system and your own private water well. At that point, you have no actual fixed reoccurring costs. So that's going to be, at least several $100s, if not $1,000 to $2,000 savings per year, as long as you don't have any repairs. So if, I pay a service contract on my septic system, it's like $225 per year. And then I do have various repairs. I'll have my lawn guy will accidentally run over a spray head. Or I had my aerator was old and my aerator went out. So I probably spend somewhere between, on average, $500 to $700 per year on my septic system. So, that's going to be a little bit of a savings over maybe normal sewer trash stuff. And then I don't have a water bill, but my well pump runs off electricity, so my electricity is a little bit higher than it would otherwise be. So there are some savings there. It's hard to figure out exactly what that was unless I went into the specs of my pump and how much water I used and all that stuff. But I can tell you, I do like not having a water and a sewer bill, and then I do pay for my own private trash service, not like mine. There's a bunch of different companies that provide trash service in these other areas, and you just contract directly with them. And so they service a bunch of homes in my neighborhood, and I think I pay like $40 a month for that. So utilities in Texas, on average, are typically going to be cheaper than the national average. And then Aledo in particular is about 4% lower. And then you have the ability to have additional cost savings depending on if you live in an area that has city utilities or if you have your own utilities. And so if that's a new concept to you, please reach out. Let's talk about it, whether city utilities are going to be a benefit for you if you are super unfamiliar with well and septic and you're I really don't want to mess with it, Jared. But I do have clients who very specifically, they want to have their own well and septic. They do not want to be on city utilities. So if that's something that you need a little bit more info on, reach out, let's have a conversation, because I do live on a home with a well and septic. I can speak intelligently to that and would love to help you figure out if that should even be a consideration for you. Some people, it's just whatever, let's just find the home in the area I like, and it's no big deal. But some people do want some information before, because it might impact their decision. Okay, now if you like clean food and local sourcing, this is one area that Aledo's rural roots really shine, is kind of this grocery and essential food options and stuff. So very quickly, our average grocery price, I think, from what I could find, it's about 1% below the national average. So no significant savings there, nothing that really is super impactful for your budget, except if you like and want to go to the effort to find locally sourced beef specifically. I know there's other places, maybe lamb or some other stuff, but very specifically beef, we've done this a few times, is there are some pretty good options in and around our area where you can buy a whole cow from a local farmer. Or if you can go in with a friend, maybe you both go 50-50. We actually found a farmer that would basically take orders and get people lined up. So we only wanted a quarter cow. We didn't really have more space than that. That basically filled up a small upright freezer for us. We had to go buy a new freezer for this. So maybe it really wasn't a cost savings, right? Future times will be. But they would line up people and just say, hey, we need 4 people in order to sell each of them a quarter of a cow. Or you could get your own 4 people and come in and do that. So, you can, buy local grass-fed, grass-finished beef. You can get a whole quarter of it. For us, what that turned into, and we got, ground beef, we got steaks, we got, a little bit of everything. And the average price per pound for grass-fed, grass-finished beef for a full quarter cow was $6. That's crazy. That's basically what we pay for just ground beef at the grocery store. Now we are buying some of the grass-fed ground beef, which is more expensive, but like we're getting like New York strips. We have, we have multiple different steak cuts in that. So this is not, we didn't get just ground beef. We got all the different cuts, and the average price per pound was $6 per pound. So that's a great cost savings. If you're maybe big red meat people, big beef people, we get made fun of for it, but that's great. That's what we love. This is not a cost savings, but it is something you can actually get here. If you're a little bit weird like me and my wife, and maybe you are into or looking into raw milk options, there's also a couple of local like dairy farms that you can buy raw milk from. Now, raw milk is significantly more expensive than pasteurized milk from the store. I think we were paying like $10 a gallon, and for each pickup there was like a $2 delivery fee to the place we were picking it up from. So we were basically paying $12 a gallon because we were buying 1 gallon at a time. Now sometimes I'd go in there and I'd see people who were buying 2 or 3 gallons per pickup, so they were only paying one $2 pickup fee. That's not cheaper, but it is something you can get here that you can't get most places. So that's kind of neat. And then the other thing is we eat a lot of eggs. My kids thankfully eat eggs really well. And especially with egg prices as they are now, there's lots of people in and around the Aledo area who basically just have backyard chickens, right? Maybe they have 6 or 12 or 20 chickens, and they get way more eggs than their family eats. And so they will sell eggs to neighbors through Facebook or whatever else. And so if you are willing to go do a little extra effort, you can get like basically free range, happy chickens that you can, buy those eggs. And oftentimes those eggs, we were paying basically the same, sometimes a little bit less, for like a similar categorized egg. So if you wanted organic, free range, all that stuff, it's more expensive at the grocery store sometimes than buying it directly from someone who has them in their backyard. And then this might sound kind of goofy, but like we can get duck eggs and even turkey eggs you can get, because a lot of people don't want turkey eggs because it sounds weird. And it is a little bit weird, but they taste almost the same. And if you've never had like farm raised, I say farm raised, right? Like local, like backyard chickens, those yolks look so much different than store-bought yolks. So on one hand, average grocery prices, just to kind of give a summary of this, average grocery prices there's no significant cost savings there in the Aledo area. However, if you are willing to go to a little extra effort and you want to source and maybe get like 100 pounds of beef at a time, you can get some significant cost savings on that beef. There's maybe some other options, other animals you can do that with. We've only done it with beef. And then eggs, you can get some really great, tasty, high quality eggs for at or below store prices from neighbors in the area. And then if you want a raw milk option, you're gonna pay more than normal milk, but it's the only way to get it. So that is a little bit on the food and groceries and essentials. Okay, let's jump into transportation. And if this is like your first time on the channel or you're very unfamiliar with Aledo, there is no public transportation. So you're not gonna be able to really function without your own vehicle in the Aledo area. We're just too much of almost like a rural suburb kind of Fort Worth. So you're gonna need your own transportation, but gas prices in Texas in general are gonna be less than a lot of the rest of the US. So as of earlier this week, when I was actually verifying some of these prices, you could get gas for as low as $2.80 a gallon out here, where the national average was like the $3.26. So that's about a 15% cheaper gas price than the US average. And if you are potentially moving from certain other states, California, you're gonna save a lot more than that. So transportation is going to be, when it comes to gas, if you're driving, most people are gonna have commutes of like 20 to 30 minutes if you're working in like Fort Worth and you live in the Aledo area, which that's really kind of the most common setup. A lot of people might work from home, but if you are commuting to an office, most of the time it's in the Fort Worth area. So you're gonna have, that's kind of what you should budget for gas if you're budgeting in, what that looks like. And if you travel for work and you're gonna be going to the airport, you're gonna have access to toll roads. So when I go to the airport, when I travel, even when I'm getting to the airport in the morning, like I'm trying to arrive by maybe 8 a.m., 8:30, I'm kind of basically driving through rush hour traffic all the way there. I can get to the airport in about 50-ish, 55 minutes, but I'm taking the toll roads. So that is something to think about. If you don't like toll roads or you don't want to pay those, that could be an added expense for you. If you're going into Fort Worth, there's really no toll roads from Aledo to Fort Worth. There's nothing there. There's really not a need there. The traffic isn't that bad. But if you're driving, across Fort Worth to somewhere else or north of Fort Worth, there are toll roads that you could utilize to increase the speed you get somewhere. You're just going to pay for that. So that's something to think about. Feel free to reach out if you have questions on like which toll roads you might be looking at or which routes you would be taking other places so that you can start looking at what those rates are, because those rates are not fixed. They are typically adjusted based on traffic flow. So the more cars flowing through, the more expensive it starts to get. Now, not on the Fort Worth side, on the Dallas side, I've seen some insane rates. I've seen it be like, $12 or $15 for the toll road, just because the traffic was so terrible. So that's something to think about. But again, it's not going to be the biggest issue unless you're driving to the airport a lot. Okay, so next up, I want to talk a little bit about education costs. And your first thought might be like, whoa, Jaron, what education costs should there be if we are moving to Aledo and our kids are going to be in the public schools? And for you, the answer might basically be none, right? We've already talked about the higher than average tax rate, right? It's an attached but different, like that's in property taxes. But Aledo ISD is growing significantly. So if you want to know about the Aledo growth, go check out my Future of Aledo ISD video. But we have multiple schools planned in the future. And so what that's going to mean, even if you're using the public school system, or really for anyone who lives out here, whether you're using public schools or not, there's going to be more bonds that are going to be needed. There's going to need to be especially allocated funds, however they're going to do that. And while those bonds most of the time do not lead to property tax increases, what they're going to do is they're going to make sure that our property tax rate is never adjusted down. I wouldn't ever really, and really you kind of might roll your eyes at that. It's like, well, when do people ever reduce tax rates if they, so maybe that wasn't something you thought could happen. But in a growing environment, certainly I would not expect tax rates to be reduced in the Aledo area for probably ever, but very specifically while we're growing the way we are and having to fund new growth and new development, there's not going to be anything there. But secondly, I want to talk to the families who are interested in the Aledo area because it's a nice area with nice schools and great families, but maybe they're considering private schools. I did a little bit of everything as a kid. I was homeschooled for a while. I was private schooled. I graduated from public school. And we have friends and I have clients moving to the Aledo area who, as much as they love the fact that Aledo is a great school district, they are also choosing to send their kids to private schools. So what does that look like? Well, very simply, if you are considering, and really not even just private school, but even if it's like a private, preschool or like a daycare setup, these are all going to kind of range and smudge, but I'm going to give you averages. Very specifically, private schools, you should expect to pay approximately on average about $11,000 per year per kid. But that can range from, one school might be as low. I think I have friends at one private school that, they only go to school 2 or 3 days a week. That's like $7,000. Then I have, clients who are sending their kids to a school where they go maybe 5 days a week. That's going to be closer to, 16-ish to $20,000 a year per kid. That average range of $11,000 per year per kid actually is pretty close to, I think, the national average for private schools. But if you go into the Fort Worth and the Dallas area, there are some private schools that range from $30,000 to $35,000 to $45,000 a year or more. I mean, you're paying more for some of these private schools than you do for like in-state tuition. So we do have some good private schools in the area as well. Maybe I need to do a video talking about those specifically. But if you are considering, maybe an alternative schooling method for your kids other than public school, there are some other options there. And for the most part, they're going to fall roughly in line with, maybe some expectations that you've seen other places, but they're not going to be the super high tier, super high end private schools that you're going to find in the Dallas area and even a couple in the Fort Worth area. So that's good to know. And if you are moving here for the public schools and you want to know, hey, more about those schools and maybe the attendance zones and what could happen, I do have 2 separate videos, one about Aledo ISD right now, 2025, and then one on the future of Aledo ISD with the potential growth and where that could be. So check those videos out. Those would be super helpful for you as you start to maybe plan and process and think about neighborhoods that you might be considering. Okay, finally, I want to touch on and end with kind of lifestyle and entertainment expenses. Really, we're going to touch on, I love to eat out. So I'm going to touch on kind of like restaurants and what you should expect to be paying, and maybe some like entertainment and sporting stuff. So, but again, very specifically, like dining out, I love to eat out. It's kind of a problem. I should do it a lot less, but because I do it as much as I do, like specifically for lunches, I'm terrible at bringing food with me to my office. So I frequently eat lunch out. And so I'm always kind of like in my head, I'm like, well, I want to eat something like reasonably healthy for eating out, but I also don't want to spend a ton of money. So in surrounding areas, it is very possible where you can have like a standard lunch for 10 to 15 bucks. I don't really do fast food. Again, I want to eat something maybe more locally owned or maybe a little bit healthier. So like yesterday's sandwich shop, I love to go there. They have like a $10 brown bag special. You get like a full sandwich, you get chips and you get a drink, and it's like $9.95 or something. So that's great. There's a couple of other places like Railhead Smokehouse, kind of a locally owned barbecue joint, a little bit more, chain-ish, but it's not fast food. There's a handful of these Railhead Smokehouses around the Metroplex, and they frequently have lunch specials for like 12 bucks as well. There's like a local pizza place that has wings, and it's like 10 bucks or something. So you can get some reasonably healthy, pretty good food, casual dining. Maybe you order at the counter and you go sit down, they bring you your food, but you're not like having a waiter wait on you. Railhead's different. You actually have waiters and waitresses, and they have $12 lunch specials. So that's great. And then you do have some higher end dining options. So even for lunch, like there's the Dane's Craft Barbecue. So that's like the high end barbecue place. And it's locally owned, like they're smoking all their stuff like right in the back. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite places. I have never had anyone say they didn't like it. I've had everyone who, if you come into town and we get to get lunch, like that's where we should go. And so I actually went there yesterday with a client, and there was husband and wife and me. And I think for all three of us to eat, it was like 85 bucks. So that's going to be, maybe 25-ish, plus tax or whatever. So that's going to be a little on the higher end of what you should expect to pay out here. I don't go there all the time. I certainly not by myself, because I don't really want to spend 25 or 30 bucks to eat by myself. But it's a great spot. I had one client tell me, he was a rodeo guy, had been all over the country, and he said he got barbecue anywhere he could go. And he said it was the best barbecue he'd ever had. Now, I put it in my top 2, maybe my top 3. But it is amazing if you come in town and we get a chance to get lunch, or even if we don't eat lunch together and you're going to eat lunch somewhere else, you should go to Dane's Craft Barbecue. There's other places around that you can get a burger for, maybe 12-ish bucks. You got to add maybe fries on top of that, so you're still going to be spending 15. Press Cafe is probably one of the bougier places out here. You are going to be looking at 25 to 30 bucks probably for an entree. So that's kind of the range. If you can eat casually for the 10 to 15 range, especially at lunch. The casual places are gonna be a little bit more expensive for dinner, maybe 15 to 20. And then the higher end places, which honestly, there's not a lot of high end places out in the Aledo area, which we have access, quick access to Fort Worth. So I've talked about this in other videos. Most of our date nights, me and my wife, we end up in Fort Worth. In the Clear Fork area. So that's kind of what we like to do. If you want the high end stuff, it's 20, 25 minutes away. If you want, local, you don't want to spend a whole lot, there are some good dining options. So now entertainment, the things to do, there's lots of free things to do, parks, trails, the district at Willow Park. I've done some stuff, some videos around that, or included that in some of my videos. During the summer now, they're doing like weekly movie nights. So it's just free. There's a big green area. There's a huge screen. You get to come and you can just sit down and watch a movie with your kids. And there's an ice cream shop. So, I'm sure they love getting, a couple hundred people showing up once or twice a week. So that's great. Where there's going to be some expenses is that sports are big in the Aledo area, as we've talked about many different times. But a lot of kids who are really trying to be competitive and really trying to, maybe move beyond the high school, and even kids who aren't, they'll get into the club sports. So club sports are really expensive anywhere you go. So maybe this isn't really a difference in price, but if you are into sports and your kids are trying to be competitive beyond maybe just playing high school sports and enjoying it, club sports could be expensive. So this is not really something where I can tell you if our club sports are more expensive than other club sports. My kids aren't in club sports. I don't know if we're going to do that, but my kids are too young for that. So if you have young kids, there's also really reasonable options. Like my kids are in gymnastics and it's super affordable. Our second just started it and he's loving it. So there's other stuff to do, but food options, pretty good food options on the pricing side. Like we are not an expensive dining area. There's lots of casual dining places, but if you are wanting the fancier date nights, there's not a lot of higher end places out here. So you're gonna head to Fort Worth for that. So that is what it costs to live in Aledo, Texas in 2025. Now, if you found this information useful, hit that subscribe button. If you are considering a move to Aledo area, reach out. Feel free to ask me questions. Maybe Aledo's not the best fit for you and maybe I can help you figure that out pretty quick. But if you are thinking Aledo is where you're gonna end up, if you do have a trip planned in the near future, whether you're planning on moving here next week or next year, reach out. Let's get that conversation started. What I found is super useful is to one, have those conversations. I'm oftentimes able to help people narrow down their search to make their time and their effort a little bit more effective. But two, what I like to do for people who come in and want to work with me is I like to set time aside on my calendar to make sure I have a full day where we can just look at as many homes as possible, really get a wide array of homes and neighborhoods and really check that out. Make sure that what you're seeing online matches with what you feel in person. That way we find that best home and that best fit for you and your family. So if that's you, all my contact information is in the description box below. Feel free to reach out. And until then, I got plenty of other videos on Aledo you can check out.